In this video, we're going to learn how to code internal page navigation or bookmarks. For this tutorial, I'm using a variation of one of the web pages that we worked on in 380. I've provided the sample code for you. If you didn't take that class or just don't have that coding around anymore, if you want to follow along exactly with what I'm doing. But if you recall, this page just had a bunch of text that we put on, we formatted. It was one of the last things we did where we did some fancy things with the header to add the text shadow. It was one of the new things that we learned. It has CSS up at the top of the page in a style section up here, as you can see. And you remember that whenever you're putting CSS in a file, it does need to go in between style tags and within the head of your HTML file. And then it just has simple formatting throughout. It's like I said, it's a variation. It's a little bit different for the purposes of showing the internal page navigation, which is what we're going to focus on here. So one of the things that I added is this nav section, and you can see it here in the HTML. You can see it here on the rendered page, and you can also see the CSS for it right here. I modified the header CSS a little bit so I could have this blending effect to it. And I worked on the border a little bit so that it would be a continuous border around this whole unit rather than just around the header. Just if you're curious, in order to get this background color that's a little bit darker than what's here, what I did was I took the hex value for the background color that I had already in the header. I went ahead and I pasted that into the color picker. And then I just dragged it down to get a darker version that I liked. I dragged around a little bit. So I got one that I liked, and then I copied that and put it in my nav value. So that's just a tip that you actually can enter values into there and then work from there to get a new color. The purpose that we're here for now is to do some internal page navigation on this page. So you can see we've got several main sections: the background, historical information, and important themes. Let's stick with those as what we're going to put in our top page navigation right here. Now remember, you need two things. You need a place to link to, and then you need the text that is linked that the user actually clicks on to navigate to that spot. So let's start by putting in those places that we're going to link to. Remember when we coded these, we have each one of our main sections in an article, right? And we can see the article, they're designated by this blue background. So each one of these blue backgrounded boxes is an article. So for example, right here, right, we've got the article. Now, we talked about the semantic coding of organizational sections on our page as being good for people with screen readers, and I mentioned that it would be convenient. We'd find that it would be convenient for other reasons as well. This is one of those moments where you can see that this has another purpose. So because we have this in this nice article organization, we can apply our CSS. We can also give each one of these articles an ID property. And all you do is you just do ID =, and then quotation mark and put in whatever name. Now, when you're naming the, and these are going to be the places where we're going to link to. When you're naming these, you want to keep it simple. I would stick with, again, no spaces, lowercase letters, something descriptive, something short, because you're going to have to retype it in order to link to it. So something that you're going to remember exactly what it is. And again, I try to keep it as descriptive as possible, so it makes sense. In this case, this is the background section, so I'm going to use background. Okay, so ID = background, and then that aligns with that H2. That's the first one in that article. Here, ID = history for that one. It's about the historical information. And then here, ID = themes. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, when I reload over here, it makes absolutely no difference on the rendered page. This is not something that the user is going to see, but we have coded in something very important. These are essentially the targets where our internal navigation is going to point, okay? Now we're going to come back on up here to our navigation, and I put a little placeholder text. Now we're going to change that. And I'm going to add in, that's a vertical pipe that I just did, and it's in your keyboard. Probably, it's sometimes located in different places, but it's probably with a shift and a backslash. So that would be one place to find it. Sometimes it seems like a mysterious character, but it's just a vertical pipe. Background, historical information, and important themes. So there we go. Now I'm going to reload here. And there we go. Now we have our text in here. It's still not doing anything, obviously, because we haven't put in the new HTML code that we're going to learn for linking within our page. We're going to use a tag called the A tag, stands for anchor, as I mentioned in the other video. We must use it with the href property, or it doesn't do anything at all. And remember that href is just our hyperlink reference. That is the location. Where is it going to go? And that does go in quotation marks. Now, when we're targeting an ID, just like when we're targeting an ID with CSS to apply a style to something with a certain name, when we're targeting an ID, we indicate that with a hashtag or pound sign. And then we use that exact name that we gave it. And just like with any other code, we put it around exactly the part of the page we want it to affect. So in this case, it would just be the word background. We got the open A and the close A. And I'm going to go ahead and do all of these. And notice it is okay for our navigation for the linked text on the page to be more than one word and for there to be spaces and all that. That's just fine in terms of what those A's are encompassing. So we've got all three of those. Now I'm going to go ahead and reload and take a look. Now it's blindingly blue, and we can fix that with our CSS. But take a look at what happens, right? So now these guys very nicely pop down to where we want them. Now, the reason this one only goes so far is because that's the end of the page. So it's just because our page isn't that long. I can actually fix that a little by zooming in and making the page sort of artificially longer. I'll show you the targeting information here better. And important themes. Now notice when I want to go back to the top of the page, I have to annoyingly scroll back up to the top. So we really should have a top link to return us to the top of the page where our navigation is. Let's take care of that too, but just let me finish explaining what's going on here, right? So we have our links, right? And notice they were blindingly blue, now they're purple. So that's just because we visited them already, and that'll become important when we do our CSS. And when we click on them, they zoom down to where we want. And it would be nice if we could have a top link that's persistent. And you probably noticed that's what happens on our course website is we have a persistent top link. So let's go take a look at the code there and see if there's something we can borrow to create a link that's going to stay on the page that would allow us to link back to the top of the page. Okay, so I'm taking a look at the CSS page that's behind one of our class sites, and there is a custom class here called Top Nav, and we just briefly did talk about custom classes already, and those are designated with that dot. And then you can give them any, sort of styling that you want, and you can apply them anywhere that it is appropriate. So this one has some different things that we perhaps haven't seen before, and we're not going to need all of it, but we're going to use some of it in order to create our top navigation. So this is just creating it as a inline block, which means things can wrap around it, but it itself is a block, so it's sort of like a button. The position is fixed. That seems important, and that I've got a little note here, keeps the button on the page all the time. It's got a bottom margin of 10, which means it's always going to stay 10 pixels away from the bottom of the screen, and the right 10 pixels means it'll always stay 10 pixels away from the rightmost point on the screen. We're probably going to have to change this color because we're going to use a text link rather than an icon link, which is what it currently is. And the text align center, we may not need that. The Z index, so you know X and Y right on your Cartesian coordinate. Z is the third dimension, so it's sort of like the layers. So this is just putting this at the top of all the different layers on the screen. So we can leave that. That's not going to hurt anything. I'm going to take a look at the HTML that goes along with that particular CSS. And I'm just going to grab the code where the top nav class is applied. And notice it is got that anchor tag, the A tag that we've been taking a look at. And I'm just going to put it at the, let's see, here on this page is below the footer. So I'm going to put it below the footer on this page. And this one is looking, so notice it's got the href, that's the pound sign just on its own. It's got this other fancy class, and that I'm not sure is going to work. So we're going to take that content out, and we're going to put in the word top instead. So there it is. And as you can see, it's super light right now, so we definitely need to work on the color. Okay, so now we've got a nice top link that persists on our page. As you can see, when I scroll, it stays where it is. And when we click it, it does in fact take us to the top of the page. So now we can, and again, I'm going to make that bigger so we can see the action. We can jump around, down, and up. Now that top link, it still needs some work, but at least it's functional for now. And you get the idea of navigating within our page. Just to wrap up our internal page navigation, remember that you need to create the place where things are going to jump to, as well as the text on the page that the user is going to click. We will talk about in a later video using CSS to do some styling to address the look of links, but for now, just make sure you understand the functionality.